question comes up so often about saying, return on investment and HR. And let me be honest, a lot of us as HR heads become very cagey answering this question, right? We kind of shy away from it till it's staring in our face. But if as an HR head, we start to ask ourselves, the first thing is when we want something, why will we not get it? I think for me, that's the starting point as an HR leader. Why will I not get it? And if I work backwards from that thought, I would build in, or as HR leaders, you'll be able to build in the right steps to why we are doing it. Have we attacked ourselves from our own process? Have we asked the right questions? Have we listened to the people in the organization? And have we been able to show the evolution of process, which DP said, or Arun said, or, Ajay said about shared services, or taking something away from the HR business partnering, or how do we enhance engagement? How have we evolved? If we are able to articulate that value, and value could be articulated in whether if it is differentiated, is it specialized, is it going to have an impact, right? Is it marginally different or actually different? We would be on a stronger wicket to answer this question about return on investment.
Prithvi? Sorry.
Yes, I agree that the questioning is a very important piece, right? But questioning must be accompanied with facts which have been analyzed and drive home a message.
Absolutely.
That, I think, is very important. So let me tell you, in the past, HR was known to question, right? But after questioning, what next? And we could not come up till we started using some of those pieces. So that's what's becoming most
so
demanding.
What I'm saying is we should question ourselves. Say, why will I not get it? And then attack ourselves to say how we are evolving the process. So attack ourselves, listen to what the employees are saying, and then show an evolution of the process.
Thanks, sir.
Prithvi?
All valid comments. I think there's a new four-letter word which, we are all just trying to tackle with it. It goes with cost. And it's called cost. And, I think the way to address that is really to change the language we use. Something similar to what Amit was saying. What we measure ourselves on has to change. Some of the things that we are seeing pays off in terms of making HR a much more impactful partner in the business strategy is really talking about different things. So instead of talking about how quickly or how much time do we need to recruit in, we've started talking about economic fulfillment. Whatever notice you give us to hire, we will deliver, whether it is 3 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And moving away from this mindset of, I can give you people only if you give me adequate notice, which really means we need to reinvent our own talent acquisition strategies. My team, myself, we carry goals related to revenue per employee. So my sales HR organization, what we've started measuring really is sales productivity. And when we measure his sales productivity, we are talking really about how much billing per salesperson am I getting and how much booking per salesperson am I getting. What levers he has to use is in his HR arsenal. How does he manage performance better? How does he make sure learning is done better? What does he pay? So the conversation is much more on a business outcome which impacts revenue directly rather than worrying too much about the metrics which go in between. The third area which I'd like to just talk about related to this is, employee productivity. I think the responsibility for making sure that we have in an IT company, high chargeability, high utilization, that people are being utilized, in a billable model as much as possible. That's clearly front and center for our organization. So, we support right from workforce planning right through to the end on actually making sure that we have the right number of people at the right time, in the right cost, with the right skill, in the right location. And any levers that impact that metric, I think we need to be accountable for. The last thing, I find that has changed the language and helped us, make sure nobody throws this four-letter word at us and say, oh, you don't care about cost, is really when we've shifted ourselves away from talking about being a business partner. You know, we are trying very hard to change our language, and it's sort of become embedded in us over the last many, many years that we need to be better business partners, we need to be on the strategy table. And, you know, personally, I'm a little tired of that because I think, you know, we need to get beyond this. And we've started talking more and more internally within our leadership teams, at least inside the HR profession, is really who is the steward for innovation in the company? Why do you need to have a chief innovation officer in the company? Why does, if the workforce is so critical for tomorrow's success, why is the HR function not the catalyst for innovation tomorrow? So, you know, and you're familiar with some of this, but, you know, one of the things we measure is what are the number of ideas that our people generate that are over and above the contract, which add value to the client. And, you know, today we are tracking at about $230 million of value created in the last 2 to 3 years from employees. And that environment of innovation, that freedom to make decisions, freedom to ideate, freedom to take actions beyond what is stated in their job description, etc., that environment is our responsibility to create. So what we have started thinking about measuring ourselves on is beyond some of the you know, what is my attrition, what is my cost to metrics. Those are important, and, you know, that list of metrics continues to grow, but the conversations we have with the leaders start with a different metric in mind and stay there. The how we deliver that becomes a different dialogue, and I think that's how we are sort of reducing the pressure that we are putting on ourselves to be a company or in a function in the company that adds value, rather than, you know, worries about being considered a cost center, support function, you know, back office, all those words.
A very
really
interesting change of paradigm, and I was reflecting while you're talking that, you know, several years ago, and you were part of that, the change in paradigm where everyone was talking about customer first, moving to say employee first, customer second, that if the employee is happy, then they will serve. I think that's a beautiful paradigm shift. And finally, last but not the least, and the reason, Sandeep, I'm coming to you last is because you're the host, right? The Taj is yours. So yeah, yeah.
Well, I've heard the respected panelists, and I feel that I can tell you a story what we try to do with the Taj overall, because we've got some 25,000 employees all over the world, and margins were shrinking, as like many industries. Hospitality is also getting hit. The average room rates are coming down. The overall revenue are not looking, in terms of year to year, that used to gallop, it was not looking that much. So we sat back and said that what should we do? We should keep the margins. So HR should play a constructive role here. We actually sent out a lot of communication to all employees through town halls, meeting them in small groups, not creating a fear psychosis, but saying that this is it, don't worry. What we'll do is that we'll all together fight it out. And we took strategies actually from the bottom, in the sense that we sat with the people, the associate level, and we asked them, what is it that can make your job more multi-skilled, more multitask, so that it's not the question of reducing employees, it's the question of doing work smarter so that we become more productive and our revenues and the margin levels don't shrink. And we've had a good run for the last 2 years. We've not allowed our margins to shrink. We've had we defined some manpower grids as to what is a ideal staff to room ratio should be for a Taj luxury hotel, for a Vivanta by Taj hotel, for a Gateway hotel, for a Ginger hotel. What is the average, how many people should be associated with one room? We came out through a study of experts who are actually our people, who are working. They told us. What is going to be a span of control? How many managers should actually manage associates? So this gave us a complete picture as to how to go about in the next few years in these challenging times. And we've had a fair run in the sense that our payroll cost to overall turnover, we've tried to keep it at more or less the same for the last 2 years, 2.5 years. So overall, when we look at the business, HR has contributed to the business by keeping the flock together. At the same time, productivity is achieved, revenue per employee is same, if not more, and we've have a more leaner and efficient workforce. I think that I shared this model because this was an example which we actually have done it. So it has contributed to business, and it is contributing on a daily aspect.
So we've got a fair number of pointers for ourselves, but before I summarize this point, I'll go back to that question. How do you create that compelling story?
Yeah, I think the key here is, does the organization place value on HR? That's the key. Now, one of the things which has worked well for us in GSK is that the organization has taken talent and culture as one of the 5 strategic growth drivers. Now, when that happens, things become much easier. Because today, the CEO has very specific objectives on his list of objectives, which is around people. People capability, people engagement, and also people productivity. And which is EBITDA per employee is what we measure ourselves. And also leadership effectiveness, that's the 4th one. Now, having said that, when the CEO is being assessed on these 3-4 parameters, I think CEO will definitely realize that HR has a huge role to play in helping him in delivering the people objectives that he has. I think there is a change, there is a mindset change that takes place. So therefore, for me, in the deal, I think that's worked beautifully. That's worked very well. And because CEO takes this as his priority, therefore the leadership team has to take this as their priority. And fortunately, I haven't struggled in terms of getting resources for myself.
So I think a lot of pointers for us in terms of whether it was about the piece on outsourcing and how do you handle it, whether it was about using data for lower cost, or indeed going back and questioning oneself rather than questioning someone else. And also what Prithvi talked about, a paradigm shift. A lot of things to take back on that topic. Now moving to the next one, we talked about technology. So when I was thinking about this, I just put down things that I was reading on the net on what is happening with technology in HR, and what I put down sort of gave me a huge question mark. I put down HRMS is getting obsolete, cloud-based HR softwares are happening, new interfaces are the key drivers for replacing systems, too many systems are happening which needs consolidation, there is huge potential for big data analytics, yeah, and that's getting adoption. Cloud technology is also making it easy to switch suppliers. The question that, along with the other question on what is a good use of technology I have is, how do you equip the HR manager to be able to ask the right questions when it's a lot of complexity, which they may not have been taught at the schools or in their past experience. So the question to the panel is two. One is, what are the kind of technologies that you see being used very differently from earlier in your experience that things have worked? And second, how do you equip your teams to be able to ask the right questions to get the right technology? Yeah.
So let me take a lead on this one. So, absolutely right. So there's lots that's changing, in terms of globally the marketplace is completely changing, and therefore the entire talent, including HR, has to respond to this, right? So let me share a few of our experiences. So as we found that there is a big shift that is taking place, and one of the big shifts is the way social media is coming into play. What is it that we can do onto this front? So there were a lot of, we leveraged technology of social media. We ran a jam. We had over 300,000 people participate onto it, and there were a lot of thoughts that got generated. We put them into the families, and we have something to work on. So we introduced what people want to know. So let's say people want to know a lot about, and this all happens online, right? So we run forums online. We run communities. We have now nearly about 130 communities, and within HR we have a number of communities which are working, and they bring up a subject or they bring up an issue, right, on which everybody contributes to that. Our CEO announced at the beginning of the year that let us all go ahead and have a 40-hour of education. You know, we have a lot of education happening in IBM, and she announced this 40-hour of education. What did it mean to all of us? So, which is, of course, an HR intervention, which she's the sponsor of it. So, HR has been pushed into first learning these technologies, what is being talked about. There are massive programs which are organized to make them understand and learn. They were made to experience this, made to use this piece. And then we understand of how we're leveraging it. Now we are in a stage of leveraging, and this is a very strong case study of IBM. From where it was in terms of using this today in the social media, it is right in the front, right? So as leaders within HR, we need to equip first all our talent into these technologies and leverage the technologies, which is most important, and we have done that. And it is not easy. It's not easy. You really need to drive it. When you to drive it across, 170 countries or where your people are, it's tough. But that's what I would say.
Okay. From one technology company to another.
From one to the other. So, everybody thinks I'm trying to make HR people drug users when I ask them, do you have any smack? Everyone is talking about social, mobility, analytics, cloud. I think the question for us has become a little deeper as to, how do we actually apply this in companies? And to your point, I think, really that's the question HR professionals need to answer before sort of jumping in feet first and becoming a user. I think we've found, we've had our own experiences. So if you go back to over the last year, we may have been one of the few companies which had people banging on the gates wanting to join, and we had to respond to that. And how did these people come together? They came together because they were members on Facebook, etc. And our response to them has also been through that media. Internally today, we are, we basically publicly said that we will avoid email as a form of mass communication to employees and use our internal social network. It's called Meme, because we have, out of our 87,000 people or so, 90,000 which we touch, we have about 75,000 registered users on that. So if we can move more and more of the conversations, communications, to pages on Meme, into which is our internal social network, the need for bombarding you with emails disappears. Mobility in terms of just making the employee experience easier, cycle time faster, approvals quicker, rather than having to chase on email, you haven't approved this travel request, you haven't approved my expense, etc. becomes easier. Analytics, I think DB spoke a lot about, making sure that we use the data to actually tailor programs from insight gleaned from there, by making sure we know what are for example, what are passion drivers for us, what really engages people, and really focusing on those programs. We found over the last 3 years, one of the biggest things we've seen, and I think you'll touch upon this in your next area, is really that recognition has significantly jumped up in terms of importance to drive passion and engagement for our workforce, with a 55% change of number of people who've responded to the survey. So clearly, with half the organization having come in over the last 3 years, you've seen a shift in what is driving them. We have to respond to that with the focus on, letting analytics drive what programs we invest in, rather than just doing what we thought or we think it will help people. And the last point around, this whole issue about cost, which we talked about, the importance of moving away from technology platforms which are on-premise and actually moving them to the cloud actually help us variabilize our own cost of service. If I know that, for every resume that I bring down from a site, Shine or wherever I use, how does that affect my cost? I can then translate that variabilization into for my business as well. So for us, all of these, what we are still asking the question very hard before we dive deeper and deeper into these areas is what employee experience is going to change What cycle time improvement are we going to see? And that's what was leading the question, where do we invest? Which social media, what cloud platforms, how much in analytics, what do we do on a mobile platform? What do we still keep on your laptop or your computer? And unless those 3-4 questions get answered well, we don't make anybody a smack user.
That's nice.
Indranil, I'm going to just add on to this an example, and sorry to take more time. So we did what you're saying, you talked about engagement, I just thought occurred to me. So what we have reached a stage is that our IBMers on all platforms, right? So they are also on our internal social platforms, they're talking on LinkedIn, they're talking on Facebook, they're talking on various pieces, right? And keeping the anonymity piece, keeping into view what is allowed by these platforms to extract and in anonymity, we have started collecting what is called the pulse of people. What are our IBMers talking? What are the themes that are coming out? And with those themes, we are then building on what could be the right HR interventions. So the engagement piece, which is there, and that is what our keynote speaker said, can you predict what people are going to think? What is going on in their mind? And this predictive piece is a very powerful one, right? And within our own organization, we as HR stood in the front and said, we're going to do that. And again, on the cost part, and Prithvi, you really brought about a fantastic point. It's about if our HR leaders and our colleagues within HR are trained to leverage these pieces, it becomes very important to get not only investment, then, return on investment. So you had mentioned earlier about, one of this about salespeople, right? So today, we are able to establish, to say that if there is an X investment made on a person, his eminence and his performance and his productivity has gone up by X plus this, and he brings in more revenue per person. So now you can go back and ask for more investment. So just thought we'll take that example.
Sandeep?
See, technology in hotels has been there for some time because most of it is on the IT platform, because whatever you see in food and beverage, if you see in front office, wherever in this hotel, is based on IT platforms, basically. That doesn't move. But going forward, on the employee front, what we've tried to achieve, I think there's more scope, but what we've tried to achieve is we've created employee portals, where we've uploaded basically everything on the portal, and they're like Prithvi rightly said, that, creating, as the company have created a platform where they're communicating, we've created a platform also called Taj Buzz, where people communicate. Hiring, for example, if there are any vacancies in any Taj, it's flashed. So people are communicating, people are talking to each other. We've got a knowledge platform also, because that's also there. Various certifications and all are, I'll be talking about that in my next point probably, in the next topic. We've tried to bring in that IT-ness, I would say, into the, because today's generation is all about that. They are into their smartphones, they have an app, they want to do it. They just don't want to go into a cyber cafe, spend that time to do it. So we're trying to relate to that, as DP has rightly said, that knowing what the voice of the
social listening.
Yeah, and going with that. That's what we've tried to achieve.
Amit?
Indranil, I think we are not a technology company, right? We sell life insurance. But I think if you look at the journey that our organization is in today, digitalization or digital space is the future for us, right? Whether it's from a customer standpoint or whether it's from a branding standpoint. And, we are moving to the social media, from online selling insurance or so from an HR standpoint, it's very important for us to recognize that, like DP said, like Prithvi said, we need to educate, understand. But as we look at Aviva today, we've kind of broken it down into 3 pieces. One is we've used an internal social media platform of our own to integrate employees. If you have employees who are spread across 80 to 100 locations all across, and some units as small as 7 and 8, and some as big as 400, 500, how do you bring that whole Aviva experience or the organization experience to the last man in the field, right? You could have someone in Orissa selling a life insurance. So we've kind of brought that up. So, whether it's through recognition and polls or, other platforms or, ideation idea. If someone has an idea somewhere to improve a process, how does that individual bring that idea to the fore for the right people? So we've kind of done that. Second is, translating the organization intent into a relationship is something that's big. If you look at our Facebook page, we have over 500,000 likes or fans or whatever you may call it, if my memory serves me right. We have such a huge base. How do we translate that base as an organization, both from an employee and a customer standpoint? I think that's the second thing that we've been talking about in the organization. The third is, if we're looking to, if we as an organization, we are going to adopt technology for our field force or sales force, which a lot of organizations are doing. I think the question that comes to the mind is, what is the HR experience that as HR team we are willing to guarantee? Because once you start to move your processes on the tablets and on smartphones or people who are distant, HR experience would be something that we would have to measure. How we would do it is something that we're really thinking about, but that's primarily what technology would have an impact on.
Very nice. Ajay, your thoughts?
Okay, I'll call ourselves a technology company with a difference. And I would beg to differ with the two gentlemen here a little bit. Not in terms of the intent, but in terms of the approach, because our approach with HR has been now, after we've moved our business model, to get HR more in front of the customer. And once you get HR in front of the customer and have that dialogue, then you bring about the shift that we talked about earlier in terms of HR becoming the business partner. So that's on the HR side. And the point that I made about technology company with the difference is because what approach we've taken, or rather our challenge has been slightly different, because our challenge is less about in terms of what you will perhaps touch in Gen Y discussion, in terms of what social media application to allow access to. Our challenge with engineers is which technology and to allow them to work upon, or rather which app to allow them to design. So for example, there would be people who would be vying for designing an application on connected homes, for example. So those are some of the cool technologies that people work with. Or if you want to design an application for Salesforce of the organization that you can access from your smartphone and stuff like that. So those are the kind of challenges that you deal with. And therefore, our interest has been more getting HR in terms of in front of the business partners and so on and so forth. So less in terms of relying on just the ERP or the intranet, because I think those have become part of the standard toolkit, whether you deploy a PeopleSoft or a SAP kind of a thing. So it's pretty much par for the course is what I would say.
Thanks.
Arun, yeah, fortunately for me personally, we are not a technology company. And why I'm saying fortunately, because if we were a technology company, I couldn't have survived in this organization. And because I'm not a technology guy, right? And but having said that, I think the point's been made is that technology does bring a lot of cost savings. Technology does bring speed, and technology does bring efficiencies. So fully accept that. And yes, GSK has been trying various technologies and trying to use. But still, I would think that we are way behind. We're behind our times. And it's now that we are investing behind a global ERP solution, which is Workday, and wherein most of the organizations have moved on. So that's happening. But the point that we're trying to make here is that we had a lot of debate about 3 years back when the discussion was around ERP solution, when the discussion was around shared services, because everybody's got shared services now. And since I had a little bit of experience of running shared services in my previous assignment, I was slightly wiser. So when this debate happened, I think there was one school of thought was that let's have a global shared services and all these services should be delivered through this global shared services. And it has its advantages in terms of cost savings, and it has some disadvantages, as the point was being made here, is whether you get the quality of service which is customized, because you are reaching out to people, you're reaching out to employees. Fortunately for us, we don't have thousands and thousands of people, like IBM would have, probably IBM has about 40, 50,000 people in India, or even more, I have no idea. Fortunately, we don't have so many numbers, so we can afford to be a little more customized we can have our customized solutions. That's a big plus we have. So therefore, the decision that was taken globally was that while we will have ERP platform or Workday, I think to begin with, we are going to have country-level shared services and not global shared services. Now, yes, we are losing some cost benefit, but it was felt that we are getting some quality benefit. So it's always a play between cost and quality when it comes to people. And I think that's the key point we got to keep in mind.
Thank you. I'm not going to summarize that, I'm sure, but I just have a sort of observation. If there is anyone from Microsoft in the room, there seems to be missed out a huge opportunity with Yammer, because everyone seems to have set up their own social media platforms internally. Right, now moving to perhaps a very exciting part of the discussion. And so that is, we said, the new generation workforce. What are the challenges that they bring in? What are the advantages they bring in? And how do you equip your the leaders who lead these people to be able to continue to motivate, connect, and inspire? Yeah. So, Prithvi, should I start with you?
Sure, sure. So the workforce mix is changing, no doubt. I think, most, at least in the IT industry, the average age hovers between 25, 28, depending on the company. And there is clearly, there has been an influence in terms of the way practices are introduced and managed. My view on Gen Y is, I think it's a bit of it's a horse that has been beaten a bit too much. At the end of the day, it's not, if you keep looking at a generation as having singular traits, it's very dangerous. I think what we have recognized, and I think it stems from some of the deep beliefs that, when we started adopting a business strategy of employee first, customer second, some of the tenets from that sort of drove a view that we should try and protect the individual, and we should really start looking at the workforce, somewhere where I read, was really as a workforce of one. What an individual is looking for is a sense of what we believe a freedom to ideate, freedom to make decisions, and a freedom to take actions on that. Yes, maybe those are traits which are more recognized in a particular generation between 17 to 33 or 18 to 33, which is, called Gen Y. But if you go and ask me, or, somebody who's been in the industry longer than me, would you like the same? I may actually want it more because, I've grown up in a corporate environment where possibly those traits were tighter in the early years. So I may be actually seeking them more. So I think what is starting to happen is that the change in the workforce mix has sort of has influenced the organization across, and people who've been in organizations longer, Gen X, etc., are starting to embrace those traits that we keep talking about much more. I think the second piece I'd just like to talk about is the way, from our perspective, as a profession, I think we need to really embrace democracy, and recognize that the only way we will remain relevant in an organization is if we actually are stewards of that culture where we allow for co-creation, we allow for consultation, we allow people to connect, be it in person, face-to-face, or through virtual networks. But if we do not become the stewards of these traits and these values to actually move the organization along, the culture will change anyway. It's like a bowl of curd. You leave it outside, culture will move in the next morning. Either the curd will be extremely sweet or very sour. You have to do something to get it to where you want. So you have to steward that through. And I think that's where HR is today, is trying to understand how to use these traits attributed to Gen Y, make sure that they're embraced and adopted and tailored for what their context is, and actually introduced and managed to result in good rather than necessarily bad.
Yeah, well, I agree that there are a lot of expectations that they have, which you're saying that you would also have. But if I look at a few things, for example, for many of us, as we grew up in the organization, no news was good news. Yeah? But today, no news isn't good news. Yeah? Or if I look at my uncle or father, they would say, I work for a certain company. Today, we would never use that. We work with a certain company. So there is a certain change that still needs to be sort of handled.
No, I agree. And I think that is the change that we must give credit to the younger workforce is bringing. That language is changing because the mix has shifted.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, the people, feedback or the desire for immediate feedback, no news is good news. Those things are dead because the shift of the workforce and because HR groups, leaders have actually responded to them. I don't know how much choice they had, but I think we have responded to it, and we are sort of adopting those. So we must give them, we must give that changing workforce mix that credit for some of that that's happening.
Amit?
A couple of thoughts that I want to take. From a leader's perspective, like you started, I think leaders need to understand that the age of probable is over. Now is the age of possible. Every young man who walks into the organization today thinks everything that he or she desires is possible. A lot of us walked in saying, probably I would do this in life. Probably I would achieve this. If this happened, I would be there. But today it's about this is possible. So I think that's a shift that leaders need to have who work with the younger workforce. Mm-hmm. The second is, while we look for employees to be culture fit and, whether they would fit in the organization, the leaders need to reskill themselves on being network fit, as I call it. We need to understand the networks that are going on, whether they are social, whether they are formal, whether they are informal, and how do we fit into those networks, because those networks are now the strength, which would gain in the organization. The third is we need to understand that work is not the end, but means to an end now. All of us at or Gen X, as we call it, or baby boomers, or many of us here, work was the end, right? That was a big part of our identity. That was a big part of our social status. But today, all of the Gen Y have a second life or an avatar, as they call it, right? Where work is a means to an end. And I'll tell you an example. I was talking to a lot of people, young people in my organization. And a lot of them said, in an interview, we get asked saying, what is our 5-year vision? What is our 10-year vision? Those questions that we kept getting asked. They said, I know what I want for next 2 to 3 years. And then from there on, I'm absolutely confident I'll take it up from there. Right, so that's what I would want. Or, if you say what drives them at work, a lot of them would come up with something that is entirely outside of work. And I was having this conversation with a young person whose whole objective was that, I want to do X and I would get rewarded and remunerated, and my work would help me send my parents to a world tour, which was the young worker's vision. So that is a means to an end. So he or she is working because send parents to the world tour. I think that's what we need to understand. The fourth point is the recognition of having it all. They just want it all. Informal recognition, formal recognition via a town hall, via a mail, it's all there. That's why if you look at social networking sites, they don't have a dislike button, right? Or why would someone put at 2 a.m., I'm drinking with buddies at Blue Frog, right? Because you would want recognition. And oh, that we were also at our age.
Like Harris.
But the point is recognition only from not recognition, but also the needs of the recognition. Sure. Do you recognize us? So I'll give you an example of what we've done. We used to all talk about work-life balance, and it would come in all, it comes in all surveys and stuff like that. We just went ahead and recognized that, okay, there is this need of taking time off, or, of doing something that, I would want to do. So we kind of went in and said we would have a mandatory leave going, right? And we also spoke to the young generation about this need to belong and need to be a part. And we then introduced in our policy to say, how do we enhance belonging? We enhance belonging by sharing. And how do we get people to share? We said we let you donate leaves. So if you like something, or there's a life event, or you want to help a colleague, you go out and donate. So that's how we incorporated it in our policy, to kind of make it happen. But that's really got a good feedback going.